Well, welcome back to Legacy on Purpose. My name is Kyle Sanders. I am the host of this podcast and the founder of Legacy Consultants Group in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I am just so thankful you're with us today. I have to tell you, it's Tuesday. We record all of our episodes on Tuesdays, and this is like Christmas for me every single week. This is so much fun to have these conversations with these incredible guests. And so I just want to thank you right now, just before we even get rolling, and just share with you how much I am so thankful that you're here with me, that you're supporting our guest. When you hear about our next guest and you listen to this episode, Rouan Kruger has his own podcast, The Thrive Factor. His story's incredible. His story's crazy. It's just a pivot and the change in his life and what we can all learn from this conversation that him and I have. But first thing I'd just ask you to do is reach out to Rouan, follow him on Instagram, tag him in a comment, tag him in one of our posts, and if you like this episode, if you like this conversations and what we're doing here, share us on social media, share us on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're most active. Share one of these episodes that have mean something for you and to you is a way to help others hear these incredible messages of individuals who are anchoring their lives and making choices based upon a set of core values and the way they live and the difference they're making because of it. So we heard about Rouan and his story, and I had to have him on because one of the things I think is so fascinating is when people make really big shifts in their lives, that they're on these paths that seem just like that's what they're going to be. You're going to be an attorney, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a pharmacist, which was Rouan's situation. And because of circumstances that unfold or choices an individual makes, they just pivot. They just make this drastic change. And so I wanted to understand how Rouan went through that, because for some people, it's the very beginning. They start in a path. It's a path of impact and service to others. And for others, like Rouan, their life changed. They had this experience that tons of wisdom came from. So I want to have him on, and he shared something he doesn't normally share with us. So I can't wait for you to hear really this situation that unfolded and that helped accelerate. It was not a great scenario that he went through, that helped accelerate his pivot away from being a pharmacist and being an entrepreneur, having an online social media marketing company, running his podcast, and really taking life in a very, very different direction. I think we had some incredible conversations and understanding what creates greatness in someone's life and success. So I can't wait for you to hear some of that wisdom that we get into during this connection. I can't wait for you to understand, really for him, what was it that helped him uncover this opportunity for him to take his life in a new way. So this is an incredible conversation. I had a lot of fun with this one, as I do with all of our guests. So Rouan, thank you so much for investing your time with us. Truly a great conversation. Without any further ado, I present to you Rouan Kruger, host of The Thrive Factor. Rouan, thank you so much for taking time. This is so exciting to spend time with you coming out of Johanna. And I want to take a moment. I think one of the things that is so special with the Thrive Factor is this idea, this concept that we all have something great inside of us. There's a way to thrive. There's a way to live life to its fullest. And I want to just recognize you for putting the content you're putting out in the world today. And I know that your audience really gains a lot of value from hearing that. And so first and foremost, thank you for making your contribution and really looking to dive into the wisdom that you've gained hosting the Thrive Factor podcast, and learning from you and the stories that you've gained in some of the amazing interviews you've had on your show. So thank you for being with us today.
Carl, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join your audience.
I thought one of the things that was really interesting, you got a kind of a crazy backstory, education in pharmacy, run a social media marketing company, and the podcast. And it's really interesting, this divergence, this path that your life has begun to unfold. I'm curious, like when you began to make those decisions, I'm going to take this different path or create this different path, quite candidly, from what you were sharing with me a little bit before we hit record. What allowed you to have, I would describe that as courageousness. What allowed you to have that in your life to move in this different direction?
When I grew up in South Africa, you were always taught to go to school, And I think that goes around the world as well. Go to university, get a good education, get a job, and climb up the corporate ladder and retire. But I think that I got involved with a network marketing company about 10 years ago where I, was introduced to entrepreneurship and marketing company in the travel industry. And I've always loved to travel. And one of the greatest things they taught one was this ability to be able to build passive income and build wealth through having your own business. And I never really seriously thought about it because I always was, this very sort of corporate kind of person, building myself up through the corporate ladder, getting a good education. I'd never really thought about it. But then I got introduced to, everybody knows Tony Robbins as well. I was living in the UK at the moment. I grew up in South Africa, and then I moved to the UK for a few years. I was there for 9 years of my career. And I went to an event in London called UPW, Unleash the Power Within. And that kind of set the tone for this entrepreneurial, / freedom mindset that I wanted to adopt. And I kind of knew that I didn't have quite the right skills to get out of pharmacy straight away. But I knew that I wanted to build something on my own, even if it's a side hustle to start with, or even if it's something where I can do something on my own that I don't always have to work for somebody else, and somewhere where I can have time freedom and location freedom. That initial jump was into network marketing. And I found that, I was quite good at selling, but I wasn't very good at getting customers into my business. So I decided to quit network marketing and, look at other business models that required low startup capital and ability to learn skills that are highly valuable so that you can bring to the marketplace. And that's kind of where I got involved with digital marketing, social media marketing. And it's taken me a few years to develop those skills to transition out of pharmacy. I am still not 100% transitioned out of pharmacy, but I think that, some people can jump straight away into something new. I'm more of a calculated risk taker.
It works with the pharmacist, man. Like, you got to be very meticulous as a pharmacist, and you got to be very detail oriented. So I got to ask you, like, Tony Robbins is obviously extraordinarily well known worldwide, and certainly well known here in the States. And his UPW event, I've never been to one, but he has CDs and books, and I've listened to a lot of Tony's material. And so what I'm very curious about is, it sounds like that was a very transformational experience for you. Like, what did you learn about yourself during that journey with Tony that, had you not known, you wouldn't be where you are today? So what was this understanding that unfolded as you went through Tony's work, as you went through this understanding of what entrepreneurship is, but specifically through that UPW experience? What did you learn about Rouan that was always there, but you didn't see that in yourself, and how has that impacted you today?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the most transformative moments was the realization that you don't have to live a life that's bound by other people's rules all the time. You can be the director, producer of your own life. And we've become so brainwashed into believing that the only way that you can progress in life is having a job and working for somebody else. So the biggest transformative moment was showing the power of what your thinking can achieve in life. And I think that mindset is one of those things that sounds very cliched, but I do think that surrounding yourself with people who are maybe more successful than you are is what Tony always talks about, is modeling. So modeling success. So fast tracking things. So for example, if you want to become a better husband or a better, swimmer or a better businessman, surround yourself with people who are already doing that and then follow their path. And probably the most awakening moment was modeling success and being able to fast track success, because I think we kind of get stuck in a rut sometimes where we just think that things can't change. But there's always somebody that's already gone through something in life that you may want to go through or are going through. And, seeking out mentors and seeking out people who've already gone through it, I think is important. I think coaching is one of the most interesting ways that you can fast track things in your life. Find mentors or a mastermind group or something that's going to help you propel yourself forward.
Lots of wisdom to unpack there. I think one of the things that really stood out with me in what you just shared is this idea of agency. Is that in the pre-UPW element that you felt you were on somebody else's hamster wheel, right? I don't know another way to put it. We've all seen that a hamster, that guinea pig in the cage, get on the wheel, and at some point the hamster probably doesn't want to be on the wheel anymore. They just keep running. They're just going and going and going. I'm like, that hamster is going to get tired. And then you see it. They get off the wheel. The little guy just ropes around at the bottom, and then a few minutes later, he's running around the wheel again. I think so many people live that way. They live in a state of constant stuckness, if you will. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're gonna use it today, right? You had the moment, whether it's Tony Robbins, whether it's a book that you might read, whether that's Man in Search of Meaning, which is an incredible book by Viktor Frankl, whether it's David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. We can go on and on. But you had this moment, you went, I love your words. I can be the producer and the director of this movie that is called my life. I love the way you described that. I don't know if those were your original words or if you borrowed that descriptor, but that's so true. Like, I don't know how long ago you took those seats back that were always yours to have, but you relinquish control over them because of a perspective. What scenes in your life, as you've stayed in those roles or reminded yourself to stay in those roles, what has allowed you to achieve or experience that in absence of you being the director and producer of your own show, you never would have done? So what is it you can reflect on that's unfolded since that decision moment to now that in absence of making that conscious choice would have never unfolded?
I think some of the biggest learning points that I've learned is, that nobody's going to give you permission to become successful, or nobody's going to give you permission to go and start your own business. Nobody's going to give you permission to learn a new skill. Those are things that you have to just take on and learn yourself. There's not a magic moment for these things to happen. If you want to make happen, then you have to go out and set out a plan to do so. And the best way to do that is to kind of know what outcome you want. You kind of always have to start with the end goal. So, obviously people talk about reverse engineering or reverse engineering
Yes.
a goal. That's a good way to start. What is the outcome that you want to get? And then find a way to get there. The key to this is not to be so rigid in your own ways that you can't be adaptable to having a sort of pragmatic approach. I think the key is, if you know what your outcome is, but you're not so rigid in the way that you get there, that's what helps with success. I think that having a flexible approach to things is what helps to get there. As long as you stay on the straight, narrow road, you may fall off on the side, but if you know where the end goal is, you can get back on track. It's just knowing how to get to the end goal, but being flexible about how you get there.
Man, oh man, could I not agree more? I've shared that same thing many a times. And I think one of the things that's so powerful, what you're talking about is, and you see people make these comments like, no plan B. Well, that's getting married to a plan that may be garbage, maybe totally garbage. We've got SpaceX here with Elon Musk, who's an incredible man, an engineer. Well, he's blowing up rockets left and right now. I mean, he's trying to build the next version that's going to get us to Mars, and he's blowing these things up like it's his job. And I think he's in iteration 11, right? Well, at least when Edison was inventing the light bulb, it wasn't such a public display of failure. Like the news crews and people were shooting videos, but he doesn't care. Like he's got such a outcome-driven vision of colonizing Mars that he knows that failure is going to be part of the process. That if he went, this is the only rocket ever that we're going to build, and this is the only way to do it, and then the thing goes kablooey on the launch pad, well, we got a problem. Because his thinking doesn't align with how this process of building a new powerful rocket is going to work. So my question to you is, for those who are rigid, that they're more focused on the process than focused on the outcome, and they find themselves stuck, how did you flip? As a pharmacist, it's very process oriented thinking. It's very engineered, and this is a different way of thinking. We're letting go of the process and focusing on the outcome. How did you detach? How did you allow yourself to detach from being extraordinarily process oriented and focus more on outcomes and learn to be more flexible in the way you approach goals in your own life?
Yeah, so goals are outcomes that you want, right? But what gets you there is the processes. So focusing on goals is important, but also focusing on the processes of getting there is very important as well. But it's about enjoying that process. It's about enjoying the journey towards that outcome. If you are so rigid that you can't be flexible about an outcome or a process, you are going to fail and you're not going to get to the outcome that you want. So, yes, for example, Elon Musk, he has this great vision of colonizing Mars, but you can't really succeed in life without failure. It doesn't work that way. The most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful people on this planet have failed many, many times. I mean, I
100%.
always use the baseball analogy. If you have a batting average of 300, right, you're out 7 out of 10 times, but you're still one of the biggest hitters in the game. It's the same analogy as where, you might be out 7 out of 10 times, but the 3 out of 10 times that you are successful, it can make you super successful. I mean, Mark Cuban always talks about you only have to be successful once. And he's right. All the failures that you had, that one time that you are successful, all the failures that you've had goes away, because that's all that matters at the end of the day. There's no such thing as overnight success. We all know that. Bill Gates didn't build Microsoft overnight. Bill Gates coded from the age of 17, 16 in high school. That's how he became a successful. This notion of having overnight success is nonsense. People also need to get away from this instant success or instant gratification. I think the most successful people are the ones who have delayed gratification as well when it comes to the goals and the dreams that they have.
100%. 100%. My parents have a small farm in Ohio, and I was visiting them for the first time in months due to COVID. And I was at their house, and my mom and dad had no coffee left over from what they'd brewed that morning. I'd been there with my 3 kids running around on the farm. I don't drink soda. Stuff's terrible. I drink black coffee, if I need a caffeine pickup. And so I was like, do you have any coffee left? And they pulled out this little packet of instant coffee. And it was awful. I couldn't drink it. It was not potable. It was not potable. It was just absolutely disgusting. And I had about 5 sips of the stuff. And I said, Mom, I hope you're not going to be offended, but I literally cannot drink this. Like, my apologies. She was great. She didn't mind, right? She's my mom, right? So I have a grind and brew made by Cuisinart in my home where we take whole beans, they grind them, it drops in the basket, the coffee is heated to a great temperature. And that's even a fast way to make a good cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. There's pour overs and all these ways to make really, really great coffee. Like, the best coffee is brewed slowly at a very specific temperature, in a very specific measurement of beans to water ratio. Right. I sound like a coffee snob. I kind of am.
That's okay.
I love this stuff. I bring my coffee to work in a metal thermos, but I will not drink coffee out of a metal thermos. I pour it into ceramic because it tastes better to me. So my point in that statement is that if you get instant success, instant coffee, it's going to taste terrible anyways. It's not going to last. People are going to dump it out. It's not palatable. It's disgusting. And because it's not built on anything real, you haven't learned the lessons necessary to create sustainable success.
Yeah.
And in Jim Collins' book, Built to Last, I don't know if you've read it. It's a fantastic book. He talks about these qualities and characteristics of leadership that build organizations that are sustainable, that are lasting. Mm. And I think really what you're tying into here is that all these wonderful leaders you made mention of are individuals who went through the process necessary to actually become great leaders. And that great leaders are built through the lessons learned from those face down in the arena failure moments. So I've got to ask you, if you don't mind, this may get a little personal, but I'm sure in this journey of building a podcast, building a social media marketing company, making this transition, you've probably had a couple failures along the way. And I define failure as an outcome that was different than the expectation going in to whatever you did. That's how I define it. It's not this negative thing. It's part of the journey. So curious, like, what failure did you have along this journey gave you the best lesson that you don't think you could have learned a different way?
What I'm going to share with you is quite personable. I have not shared that with many people, but I was a pharmacist who lived in the central coast of California in the US, and I had a great life. I had everything that I wanted. I had a good job. I was the top of my profession. I could go on loads of vacations every year, travel, do things that I really wanted. And, I went out with a friend of mine one night in a small town in California, and we had a few drinks. And, on my way home, I was arrested by the police for, suspicion of driving under the influence. And I was arrested and I was charged with a DUI. And I had just renewed my work visa in the United States, and I was about to start an MBA program in London through business school there. And I left the United States. I knew that I was going to be in a little bit of trouble with the law, because I was either on the verge or just over the limits. So I hired a lawyer to help me to fight my DUI charges. And I ended up in the UK, and I ended up going to the American Embassy in London. And I was in the embassy, and they said, your visa application is fine. I only intended on spending a week in the UK and was hopefully just going to go back to the US after that. So I then got a letter from the embassy the following day saying that I needed to go and get a police report. So I kind of knew that I could be in trouble. A long story short was that I eventually, what was meant to be spending a week in London, I ended up spending 4 months in the UK.
Oh my.
And eventually I was actually thrown out of the United States because of the DUI arrest. I was eventually found to be over the limit and guilty of that. But at that point, I wasn't even convicted of anything yet, So they throw people out just because they've been arrested. So
Holy cow.
I couldn't go back to even pack up my clothes and my belongings in the US. So my life as I knew it was over. So I had to find work pretty quickly because I was running out of money. So I decided to just hop on a plane, come back to my home country of South Africa, which I hadn't lived in for 13 years. I'd been away for a long time. And I had to come back and live with my parents, start over again. I had to fight off legal challenges that I had to overcome, and I had to rebuild my life. But, I was very blessed to find a job very quickly because I'd maintained my license as a pharmacist here in South Africa, and I managed to rebuild my life. I paid all the legal fines, and I did tests and stuff to say that I'm not an alcoholic, and I got the clearance to go back to the United States. So all these things happened over a period of time. But the one thing that I never gave up on was, just because something happens to you, it doesn't mean it changes you as a person. And the lesson that I learned from that was that you can start again, you can build your life again, you can reinvent yourself. That's kind of what I did. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned out of that was that it fast-tracked the entrepreneurial sort of feelings inside of me. It fast-tracked the willingness to learn those skills so that I don't have to worry about, if ever something like that happens again, if I needed to earn money in a way where I could be in a city, I have the skill sets to do that. So if I'm in a strange city, my mindset is that I'm in a strange city. If everything is taken away from me, what can I do? So if I know how to build an email list, if I know how to run advertising campaigns for clients, no matter what city I'm in, all I need maybe is an internet connection, right? So that was my mindset. That was the sort of raw mindset to kind of get over that disappointment that happened to me,
I think that's so powerful. I had the honor of interviewing a gentleman by the name of Charlie Engle, who ran across the Sahara Desert consecutively. Like it was like 111 days, him and a couple guys. It was actually, there was a film done of it called Running the Sahara. And he talks about the one truth that you really just alluded to, is that the most important in life is not what happens to us. It's what we do once whatever the thing is happens. It's what we do with it. What I hear you saying is that this event, this, unfortunate mistake that you made, you probably didn't, maybe in the moment didn't realize you had as much as you had. You thought you were okay. Sounds like it was a borderline situation and people have been there before. You got behind the wheel and you made a choice, and that choice, you paid an enormous price for that one choice. And you could have at that point in time you could have, my gosh, moving back down with your mom and dad, and don't know how old you were at that point, but nonetheless, you could have taken a very different approach to that. And what you looked at is that situation. And one of the things I think is really interesting is that this entrepreneur spirit of who you are came from one of the hardest things it sounds like you've been through. That this tremendous, difficulty and adversity and getting thrown out of a country. Are you kidding me? I've been thrown out of a bar before. I've never been thrown out of a country.
Yeah, I recommend it.
So, that's a different level of. I've been obnoxious in a bar before when I was in college, and they chucked me. It's but I got to stay in the city. That's a kick in the ego. I don't know another way to put it. that could have been devastating. And imagine you had some darker moments, some moments where you're probably pretty blue during that process. I'm curious for you, like, what challenging thing have you overcome as a business owner that you believe the resiliency that you built through that process helped you push through that resiliency needed as a business owner, that you may have, the old version of Rouan may have quit. So how has that resiliency served you today as a business owner of going through that crazy story you just shared?
You have to develop a thick skin if you are a business owner, because you have to wear many different hats. You have to be the CEO one day, then be the salesperson next day, then you have to be the person who looks after customer service the other day. I'm just going to talk about online business here, for example. You get a lot of rejection. There's a lot of people who don't believe in your service. But I think that the biggest learning point is to just keep going. Even if you get rejected by people, it doesn't matter, because the more you do something, the more confidence you're going to get in something. The more confidence you build in yourself, the better you are going to become at something. And I think many people give up too quickly. They're on that verge of a breakthrough, and then they give up because they're tired of rejection, or they're tired of no's. And of course, one of the hardest things in entrepreneurship is that you get paid for results. You don't get paid for your time, right? So you can spend hours and hours and hours and hours of learning new skills and trying to get clients and still get rejected. But, the more confidence you develop, the more people start to get to know who you are as a person or who you are as a brand. If you give it a certain time frame and you know that you've given it 100%, then maybe you can change or you can pivot into something else. But I think people just give up too quickly sometimes.
Oh, no question. And I think so much of that anchors to, they're not really sure why they started to do what they were doing to begin with. And I don't know what it's like in your country, but I can certainly say this observationally here in the United States, is that so much of people's reason for starting something is because how they perceive other people will perceive them. So it's what they think other people will think of them when they achieve this thing. So their motivation is almost entirely externally motivated and anchored to not even conversation, but perception of what they believe other people will say or do or act when they accomplish a particular goal. And it's not anchored to beauty. It's not anchored to love. It's not anchored to values. It's not anchored to anything internally, or very little internally. And I'll share a quick story on this. So I signed up for an ultra marathon here in the States. I was going to run across a canal trail through Illinois, 50 miles. And due to COVID, they canceled it. And I had about a 7-day pity party. I was irked. I think there's like 400 people that run this thing, and the trail is almost a point to point, and the longest distance you could run during this course is 100 miles. So you had a
Wow.
31, a 50, and 100, right? So you got to 31, some of those people are going to leave the course. Get to 50, some of the people are going to leave the course. So you start with 400, but as time goes on, that number came down and down and down. And I think my degree's in finance, so math is a challenge for me, is I think if you take 400 into 52,000 plus miles, I think you get more than 6 feet. We could have spread people out.
Sure.
So I was a little irritated. And then I stopped and said, why did I want to run 50 miles to begin with? Why was I even doing this to begin with? My motivation was only on one thing, is I wanted to show my kids the benefit of doing difficult things. I ran the 50 miles because I wanted to let my kids see me suffer, let them see me muck through the suck, if you will, and let them see that outcome. And I went, well, wait, if I run this out of my house, I can actually get a better result of the thing that actually mattered the most for me to begin with. It was never about the medal at the finish line. It was about what I was modeling the people I love. And I wanted to understand, could I do something like this? So my curiosity to you is, as you've interviewed all these incredible people on your show, how often do you see people achieve great things who don't have some internal motivation for what they're working for?
I think a lot of people that I have interviewed on my podcast, I think it comes down to something that motivates them, or there's something there that pushes them forward. For example, I interviewed a guy on my podcast who was wrongly imprisoned in Texas for 40 years and who came out as a convicted felon, but eventually had overturned that conviction and, definitely became one of the best marketers because he was so motivated to prove to people that, what happened to him was unfortunate, but such a deep level of motivation, to prove to people that his life wasn't that, that his life was something more significant. I don't think I've ever met anybody that has not done something out of motivation, which is maybe from pain. Like there's a lot, sometimes people do things motivated out of pain for the situation that they were in, maybe when they were younger or in their business. So pain can be a great motivator to motivate yourself or to achieve something. I think the best sort of motivation, though, comes from when those values that you have as a person is aligned with what your goals are. So your values and your goals align. I think that's the best type of motivation I think you can offer or you can do.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that I see, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, is that a lot of people aren't really sure what their values are, that they're not sure what they stand for. Like, as you've gone through this process of interviewing others or self-discovery, like, do you agree with that? That those people who are doing great things are pretty clear on what their values are. They've thought through them. They can articulate them pretty well. And those who aren't making a big impact, is that a fair observation in your opinion?
Absolutely. I think the more clarity you have about your values and your goals, I think the better outcomes you achieve. I've yet to see anybody achieve great things without being very clear about what their values are and where they are congruent or not. I think sometimes people do things in their lives which is not always congruent with their own values, because
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's the case?
I think people do it because they see people achieve a certain level of success, maybe in financial success or whatever success that is, and they think that they can do the same for themselves. I think at the end of the day, it's not going to last. It's at some point it's going to kind of conflict with who you are as a person deep down, and that's kind of maybe where you then tend to fall a lot faster.
Well, I think we're dancing around a very important topic, which is the concept of patience. Is that there's this idea out there a lot, where it says, I want to be successful. Awesome. Like, that's great for you. Well, number one, have you defined what that actually means to you? And I'll never forget a story. A neighbor of mine, I was home early. I didn't leave for work super early. I didn't come home super late. We live right next to one another. I'm out in the yard playing with my kids a ton, and our homes have similar values. Like, and they're worth about the same amount of money. And she says to our pediatrician, like, what does Kyle do? Like, how is he doing that? Like, my husband's gone at work all the time. Why is Kyle, like, what's happening there, right? So this gets back to me, right? This gets back to me. And it's just not out of a judgment, right? But I also know that they belong to the really expensive country club. They drive brand new Mercedes Benz,
Mhm.
and I don't do those things. And I think so often how we define success has a large bearing on and can have a large bearing on whether we actually are experiencing it. So if you define your success by having really shiny, fancy material things, then there's an exchange for that. There's an exchange for that. For me, it's time. Success to me is time. It's time with the people I love. It's freedom and it's time. That's my biggest measurement. It's not about what I own, but it's who I get to spend my life with the most. When I've built my businesses, it's all anchored around creating that outcome of freedom of time and certainly financial freedom. But part of the way I obtain financial freedom is discipline, is what I say no to. And so one of the things I'm curious as you've observed this is that how often do you see, because I think I see it a lot, where we define like, I want to be successful, and successful is measured by somebody else's yardstick. How important is it to you for that yardstick to be one you design yourself and you spend the time to be clear on it as you work towards these goals?
Yeah, I think that yardstick is essential, because if it's not authentically you, then it's not going to be realistic when you achieve whatever goals you set out to achieve. So if your goal is to become the CEO of your company or the CEO of your own company, but your goals are also to maybe become a best-selling author, I mean, if that's not your dream or that's not your goals, but you kind of go towards it because it's what everybody else does, it's not authentically you. So again, it comes down to authenticity. The goals and the dreams that you have or the lifestyle that you want to build has to be authentically you. And I think people see through that. If you're not living your life authentically, you see a lot of these posters on Instagram, for example, of people living the luxurious life, but they rent these mobile cars or these airplanes that's not authentically them. But then you can see people who, are very wealthy, but they just completely understate it. It's authentically them. And I think people are attracted to authenticity these days. The days of faking it is over, especially in the online space. People can catch on to that very quickly when they can see that you're not authentic. And I do believe that if you are authentic and your goals and your values align, then you can achieve a lot of things in life.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. There's a particular person when you talk about planes and all this jazz, I think of that's online a lot, and I won't mention the name because I don't want to be. I don't speak poorly of others and don't know him personally. But everything's like I have all the money and showing $100 bills and all this garbage, and it rubs me the wrong way. It's great for him. It's great for the people that follow this person. But there's somebody by the name of Jesse Itzler. He sold two companies, one to Warren Buffett, the other one to Coca-Cola, and his wife is the first self-made billionaire female in the United States. And so they're not hurting for cash. And you'll never find a photograph of his plane. While they own a plane, you'll never see one on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
right? At all, period. Because it's not what he's about. And he's an amazing guy, very humble, very, very humble. If you call him a celebrity, it bothers him. Like, it's not why he's doing it. It's not why he's putting content out there. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's like, be you. I don't own a plane. I don't think that necessarily is the definition and filter of success. Like, if you're holding that out there as the way to know whether you've been successful, I wish you all the luck in the world. Those things are extraordinarily expensive,
Yeah.
and I think there's meaningful ways to know if you've been successful along the way. And we've shared a lot of great ones in this conversation, Ron. So first, I want to thank you for being the model. Man, oh man, is your story incredible. Where so often we get on this track, like people ask us, like, what are you gonna be when you grow up? All the time. It's ridiculous. And then you decide to go a different direction. And like, well, I thought you're gonna be a pharmacist. Yeah, no. I want to be happy. I want to be happy. And what I learned is that's not the pathway for me to be happy. So I want to thank you so much for just sharing your story here today. Got two more questions for you I want to ask you before I let you go, but I just wanted to pause and just thank you because this is a fun conversation, and I didn't know that story about you and really how you got here. So I think one of the things you're a huge advocate of is self improvement, learning, knowledge, development. What piece of advice would you give others who are embarking upon that? Maybe they don't even know where to begin. Maybe they don't even know where to start. Maybe they're a little nervous. Like, I don't even know where step one is. That you would give somebody, they've listened to us, they've listened to what we're talking about, they listened to your story of really taking agency over your life. What advice would you give that person on where to begin now that you know what you know, where you are today? What advice would you give to somebody who's at the very beginning of that journey?
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Kyle. I appreciate you having me on your show. Genuinely, if you're looking for an answer, where to start with what goal or what outcome you want to achieve. What is it that you really want to accomplish in the next year or the next 2 or 3 years, even the next 2 or 3 months. Start small and go bigger later. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking for an answer about a certain question, is go and look for people, go look for mentors, go and look for people who have already done what you want to accomplish, and see if you can add value to their lives. Don't ask them straight away to help you. Go and find a way that you can add value to their lives, and then develop a friendship, a relationship with them. And don't ask for anything in return immediately. Go and be a servant to them. Once there is a relationship established, then go and ask them, find a way to help them, or ask them, how would you do this? Or how would you do that? I think finding mentors is one of the fastest ways to really achieve what you want to achieve. But don't just ask for something, add value as well, so find out what charities they are interested in, and see how you can maybe help out with a cause like that. I think building a network of mentors and friendships is how you can start.
I love that. Start with people.
Absolutely.
Start with people and add value.
Absolutely.
Start with people and serve. I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful advice. I love everything about that. I have to admit, I believe this is the first time I've had a conversation with somebody while they're in South Africa. So thank you for that gift. It's a beautiful gift for me. I want to thank you again for spending your time with us. Truly meaningful and such a gift to hear your wisdom, to hear your story. I wish you all the luck as you continue to build your companies, to build your podcast. I hope people, as they hear what you have to share, tune into your show, learn from you, and learn from the wisdom that you're bringing forth to it. So thank you for all that. Before we ask this last question, how can people support you? How can people follow you? Where can they get connected to you if they want to learn more about you and what you're putting out in the world?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Rouan Edwin Kruger. It's Rouan. And on Instagram, it's KMI Rouan, and it's Rouan and KMI. So I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I have an agency as well by the name of High Impact Agency, www.highimpactagency.com.
Wonderful. We'll link to as much of that as we can in the show notes. So thanks for sharing that. One last question for you. What does legacy on purpose mean to you, Ron?
Legacy on purpose means to just be authentic in who you are as a person, and build a life that you are proud of, that people are proud of, and people remember you by. So building a legacy where people can remember you for being a good person who helps people and who's helped people in their lives. I think that's what legacy on purpose means to me.
I love that. I love that. And I can say with all the confidence in the world that people will remember you for sure, Ron, for the good you're doing for others. So thank you for that. Well, what an incredible conversation. I don't know about you, but I think I can really relate to Ron in that unfortunate mistake and how that changed everything for him. And now reflecting back on that one mistake, that one unfortunate event, how that one incident allowed him to open doors that he may never have opened. And I think one of the things that lesson, that story that he was so gracious to share, that moment of vulnerability, the reminder I hope that gives to all of us, to all of you, is that in our darkest moments of trials and tribulations, if we can remember that that's where all greatness is born from, most positive directions of life comes from a failure moment, a face down in the arena moment. It allows us to navigate that differently, to be looking for those lessons, being aware for what we're supposed to be learning, that we could carry them forward with us. I hope you carry a lot of lessons forward from this conversation and connection with Ron. And again, I thank you so much for your investment and your time with us here on this podcast. Truly means the world for us. Go out and follow us on Instagram. DM me. Let me know what you thought about this conversation. And as a reminder, go out and live your legacy on purpose.